Mama, I got bad news, bad news. I've been rolling with some bad dudes, bad dudes. I've been trying to get a bag too. I'm just doing what I have to. I said, Mama, I got bad news, bad moods every day. Brand new tattoos on my face, sad dude with a head full of rain. I just wanna make it rain, Mama, I will be okay. I feel like I might break right now. I feel like making a fucking mistake right now. Ew. I just need a cake right now. I blow out all the candles in my brains right now.
Hello folks, and welcome to the Dopey Canuck, an often humorous look at the serious issues of drugs, recovery, addiction, and all the crazy dumb shit in between. My name is Tuck LaFlange, and thank you for tuning in. So, right off the bat, I usually put in a little disclaimer here about how I am not trying to glamorize the addiction lifestyle, nor am I trying to minimize the seriousness of it. And you might have noticed I changed my wording at the beginning of this episode a little bit to an often humorous look instead of a humorous look. And that's because all night I was thinking about how this show is meant to get the message about addiction out. And I think so far I've done a pretty good job at getting people's attention. At least I hope I have. And I think they can't all be funny episodes. I think that's great to get your attention, like I said, but at the end of the day, they just can't all be funny because addiction is nowhere close to always funny. I've cherry-picked some stories, and I'll continue to do that in the future, but in this episode, I want to talk about the new landscape of the drug scene, the drug world, right? We have, well, two things have happened, really, meth and fentanyl. So the way I put that, is my way with words is I say that with these two drugs, we've created a perfect storm. So we've got one drug, fentanyl, that people will do literally anything for. It's physically addicting, it's horrible, and it literally changes people's brain chemistry in record time into needing it or feeling like they're going to die. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody suffering or being what's called dope sick, but it's an awful thing to see. I've literally watched grown-ups scream in pain and shit themselves. They've been so horribly dope sick. And then meth, which I mean, it affects everybody very, very differently. But the one constant truth about meth is it keeps people awake, and it keeps people awake for a long time. So you put the two together, you've got one drug that people will do literally anything for, and another drug keeping them awake for 2 weeks at a time doing it. It has changed the landscape in so many ways, and even being in the thick of the drug scene when it started to happen, I still couldn't tell you how it happened. It used to be people were, they did coke or crack or ups in general, and then, or they did downs, and down is a term that's funny because when I was a kid, down meant heroin, and then as a younger to, most of my adult life, I guess, down meant morphine, or for the most part, at least in the region I was at, and then now down means fentanyl. Right, and down is a broad term when it comes to drugs. It means anything on a down level on typical opiates, but it's funny how the casual use of it and the slang has changed over time to what's now by far the deadliest drug the world has ever seen. Deadliest street drug, anyway, the world has ever seen. And now, of course, we've got carfentanil, which is another 100 times more powerful than fentanyl. And these drugs are miracle drugs if you're somebody suffering from like a third-degree burn or some other sort of horrible pain, but they're fucked up, eh? The history of fentanyl, where it came from, was, as I understand it anyway, and there might be different versions of this, but back in the day, the cartels used to spike. Well, okay, fentanyl was created as a painkiller, as an artificial opiate, right? And in the beginning, it was used for what it's supposed to be used for, and like all prescription drugs, of course, it was, misused and all that as well. But where it became a street drug en masse, anyway, was the cartels used to cut their heroin with it. Spike. So if you're cutting a drug, you're weakening it, but bulking up your quantity so you can sell more and make a higher profit margin. If you're spiking a drug, you're making it more potent, and so it's a quality over quantity thing, I guess, if you want to twist it that way. So the cartels eventually went, well, why the hell are we growing poppies and carrying on and shipping heroin in from overseas when we can just make fentanyl, right? So that's what they started doing. And somewhere over the course of COVID, when drug prices were all over the fucking map, fentanyl was the one thing that started to drop in price. It was just crazy. Cocaine on a wholesale level had doubled. On a retail level, it had only gone up 20%. So for somebody like me who was, in the middle of it back then, that was really bad math. But meth had doubled across the board. Meth is weird. It doesn't have a ceiling at a retail price. Like, people will pay whatever they have to pay for that. But fentanyl just kept coming down in price. It's now at less than 25% of what it was 3 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that just nuts? This is a deadly disease or deadly drug. And anyway, the thing that's happened, of course, with that is the deaths and the violence. Maybe I'll speak to the violence first. So I went 20 years of being in and out of the drug game, and not once was I worried about getting robbed. Not once did anybody really give me a hard time. Granted, I was pretty picky about who I would deal with and all of that, but still, not a single time did I ever even, it never even occurred to me that I might be about to be in trouble, And then in the course of 2 years, I can't tell you how many times I've had a gun in my face. I won't tell you in detail about some of the things that have happened to me. It's been bad. It's been really bad. The level of violence came out of nowhere, and it came hard and fast, and it's left me in rough shape sometimes, with PTSD. But it is what it is. So, and of course, the other thing that's happened is death. If you are involved in the drug world, especially if you have any connection to fentanyl at all. And that doesn't mean that you do it or that you sell it. It just means that you happen to be around people that might do it. Death has become normal. It's completely normal. It's, for quite a stretch there, hearing somebody's name that had overdosed every week or two was normal. Somebody you knew, right? And it was just, it's crazy how the landscape has changed. And it's, if you've been sober for more than, I'll say 5 years, but probably even less than that, you don't even know anymore. You don't know what the drug world is like anymore. It's a totally new landscape out there, and again, in my mind, it's the combination of those two drugs that's done it. So, the deaths. So, I've wrestled with this one here internally when I thought about doing a different kind of episode, and with the exception of somebody who was related to me, I'm going to use real first names on the deaths, and then avoid any sort of connection to surviving family members, just to respect everybody's privacy. So, off the top of my head, drug addiction. The first one that I remembered clearly was Jen. Jen was a sister, cousin, girlfriend, daughter to a whole family that I know quite well, and that was before fentanyl. But but drug addiction directly led to her death, and the lifestyle that went with it. That was the first time that I was really exposed to it, and thinking back on it now, and I know there's a very good chance, well, I know for a fact that at least her brother and one of her cousins is going to hear this, and guys, I still, I feel your pain. Oh, I don't feel your pain. I try to empathize with your pain because she wasn't my family member, as close as we were. That was horrible. So, a shout out to her memory. And then after that, oh, there's been so many. There was Chelsea. There was another Chelsea. She was supposed to come to detox the last time I went. She was right around the same position I was on the waiting list, so would have been there the same day as me. And I found out months later, I just assumed that she decided not to go. And I find out months later that she had died 2 days before she was supposed to come to detox. There was Mariah, who I had a special place in my heart for Mariah. Her positive energy when we were in detox last time was it was intoxicating. She's a beautiful girl, sometimes over the top, but nonetheless, she was doing well as well. She was sober and fell off, and the thing about falling off is sometimes people make up for lost time and just kind of dive like head first back into the dope, and she did, and she passed a very short time later. So there was Brooke, who nobody even knew did fentanyl, and she passed as an overdose. There was Sophie. She wasn't an overdose. She took her own life, but again, drug addiction directly linked to that tragedy. I'm having to stop and start recording over and over again here because I'm having a really hard time getting through this list. And this list is just off the top of my head. The sad reality, the very, very sad reality, is that there's so many names that I'm forgetting right now because I'm pressuring myself to remember them. Not one of the names I have mentioned, not one so far, has been over 30. You think about that for a minute, right? All of these young ladies, and most of them mothers, have died as a direct result of drug addiction, and the majority of those fentanyl, but not that the drug of choice matters when the family's mourning, right? The vast majority of my life, I've been using drugs and addicted to, something anyway. But about a year ago is when I really started to make like hard efforts at cleaning up, and it's taken me a lot. I fucked up those efforts a bunch of times, but the day that I had decided to quit yet again, sometime close to a year ago anyway, I'd gotten the news about one of my friends back home, and back home being where I am now, I wasn't at the time, the Lion. And there's some discussion about the circumstances around his death, but at the end of the day, the Lion passed from a fentanyl overdose. So whatever the circumstances were, it's sad. It's so sad, because the thing about him, and I'm going to sidetrack for a second before I get into my next person I want to talk about, but the Lion, he's going to come up in future stories here. He's a big part of our lives, my group of peers and friends and people that have got their shit together. He was a big part. Where I met him, I'm just going to tell a quick little story about him because it makes me smile, and right now I need that. So I was in juvie at the juvenile detention or whatever, doing a bit for being a moron anyway, and I had all of a sudden, I'd been accused of stealing something out of another guy's cell, deodorant, believe it or not, but little things can be huge things when you're in jail. So I was about to face off. 4 or 5 guys had come into my house, we called them, into my cell, whatever. And I was standing there shitting bricks, and I was about to take a thump. And this guy pushes past the crowd of guys that have just walked into my room, and he comes and stands beside me. And he says, "Well, it looks like it's all of you on 2 now." I'd never even met him. This is the Lion. This is who he is, right? Like, and then, anyway, I got the news of his passing the day that I was trying to sober up, and I didn't have the capacity in that moment to deal with it. I just didn't, and it was sometime later that I finally reached out to my group of friends back home, and was able to kind of get the details or whatever about what had happened. And the world is missing a soldier, truly a good guy, a good guy. I mean, like the rest of us when we were younger, he was a bit of a maniac and did some dumb shit and whatever, but the world's missing him right now. And the next and I think final name that I'm going to talk about, and I have to call her Cuz because of my anonymity and how important that is to me as I make this show. Cuz she was in her 30s. Her and I were the proverbial black sheep, and just in the last couple years that she was alive, she had cleaned up. She had cleaned her act up. She was hard on the fentanyl and has 5 kids. But she was going hard on the fentanyl, and her life was unmanageable at best. She wasn't doing well at all, and she had moved out of town to closer to where I was, the same part of the world I was, to live with my mom. And my mom, my mom treated her niece like her own daughter and helped her to start to get her life back on track, and she did so well. I think it was 11 months, and forgive me, Mom, if I'm wrong with the date there, but I think it was 11 months she was clean, and she was fighting this battle to get her children back, and ultimately she lost the battle. And there's no doubt in anybody's mind that losing that battle resulted in her going back to the drugs, right? And she died in a bathroom, overdose on fentanyl, right? I've had the displeasure of having to use Narcan a few times now. The last time was maybe 2 weeks before I left where I was and came back here, to be sober for good. And the thing is I imagine I'm like, a lot of people in the world. I don't just hang around casual people very much, and I care about people. Like, I really care about people. So if I'm spending any kind of time with somebody, I probably, care about them at least at more than a surface level. So when it comes time to Narcan somebody, it's terrifying. And to all of you that do fentanyl, and you say things like, well, you've had Narcan, you know what it's like. Well, you don't. You don't, because you do fentanyl. And you're going to be high when that time comes to Narcan somebody. Well, you're sober and hate the drug anyway. And you have to literally save, like, somebody's dying. Their lips are blue. They are dying in your arms. You're shaking them. You're smacking them. You're splashing water on them. You're screaming for somebody to bring you some fucking Narcan. If nothing else motivates you to quit, let that be it. The people around you that are saving your life, it's not okay. It's just not okay to put them through that. There's outside of the violence in my life, there's nothing more traumatizing I've ever lived through. This most recent time, it was 2 nasal Narcans and 3 needles before she woke up. The time before that, somebody else, somebody that I really cared about as well, and it felt like an hour, but it was probably 10 minutes because paramedics are pretty good at what they do. But there was no Narcan, so all I could do was keep the operator on speakerphone at 911 and give chest compressions until the paramedics showed up. And on their way out the door, after saving her life, they said, "See you later." And at first, you just want to say, fuck you, right? But you stop and think about that for a minute, and it is so commonplace. These paramedics see the same people over and over and over again. And imagine the death that they experience. And I talk about how somebody every week or two. But these paramedics are saving the lives of people that in their minds are just going to die anyway. And I can't imagine that. That job must be so hard, so hard. So shout out to all the first responders at the end of the day, but especially the paramedics that have to deal with this shit day in and day out. I don't know how you do it. I just don't know. I'm not ashamed to say that I just had to stop recording and have a really good cry about the list that I just listed off there, folks. So, you know, I previous episodes here, I've talked about how I've been tasked with finding a takeaway from all of this, from every story, you know, and this one's easy. I mean, it's really easy. All these shining lights, all of these people are somebody's daughter, sister, mother, brother, son, friend. And for what? You know, for what? So, I mean, the takeaway's obvious, you know, just say no. Fuck, if it was that easy, right? None of these people, you know, in the case of the fentanyl addicts, not one of them chose. Not one of them chose to die the way that they chose, or the way that they died. Not one of them chose to roll around on the floor screaming in pain and shitting themselves because they didn't have their drug. And when people say, well, it was their choice, you know, and it's not. It's a series of these little micro choices that get you to that point. And the difference between me and them is I took a left when they took a right. I zigged when they zagged. But it could just as easily have been me, and it could just as easily have been just about anybody in your life, especially with something like fentanyl, because it grabs you so fast, and it messes with your brain, and it messes with your body, and it's this horrible fucking thing. So if you haven't done it, don't. If you're in active addiction and the one drug you haven't done is fentanyl, don't try it once. Please don't try it once. So many people die that way. And if you are doing it, my thoughts and prayers are with you, and I hope that you can find, maybe today's a day you reach out to somebody. I truly hope that it is, you know. So I guess this is the time in the episode when I list off my gratitudes, and a couple of them are going to be repeated right now, but that's fine. My cuz, you know, I wish I could put a real name on here, but I just can't. I got to stay true to my format that way. But number one spot is cuz, you know, she's her passing is a constant reminder to me of the perils of that lifestyle, and in no small way a part of why I'm not doing drugs anymore. So yeah. Number two is my life. Ties back to this whole thing, and how so easily that could have been me, and the fact that I'm here now is something I have to be grateful for, and I sincerely am. Number three, my friends again. You know what's really cool, and this happened more than twice in my life, but two really notable times in my life. I have been fortunate in that when I've come back from the dark side, my friends have taken me back in, and almost in a casual, well, what do you mean? Of course we did kind of way, right? And you got to appreciate that when you're in the thick of active addiction, it feels like nobody, you know, it feels like nobody's ever going to love you again, and you wonder if they should, right? Because your self-esteem is so low. So when your friends just welcome you back with open arms and kind of a, well, of fucking course we did, you know, kind of attitude, it's a pretty amazing thing. My somebody I knew not that long ago, just before I got out of my addiction, or started my recovery, I should say, said to me that for all the chaos in your life, and there has been chaos on a level that I haven't begun to describe or that you could begin to understand, they said, for all the chaos in your life, Chuck, you tend to hold on to some really incredible people, and that's a true story. Fuck, I do, you know, I hold on to some great people. So yeah. Number four, of course, is you guys, the listeners. Without you guys listening, I've got no point in recording. For that, I am grateful. So that said, if you're enjoying the content, not that I expect you to have enjoyed this episode, but you know, if it's giving you something to think about, and you'd like me to continue recording episodes, please don't hesitate. If you feel like donating, please donate. It really does help me out. As well, there's a cool way that you can help out and help yourself at the same time. So that Koho, K-O-H-O, the online bank. They're not a sponsor of mine, and I'm not trying to advertise them. But if you go to my Facebook page, Dopey Canuck, and look for the link. It's a couple posts down now. If you sign up with my referral link, we both get $20, and that happens as soon as you spend $5 with your Coho account, which you can do right away because they give you a virtual card. You don't have to wait for your card to come in the mail. So if you're going to order, skip the dishes or something, or do some online shopping, you can just transfer a bit of money into that account, after you're verified, do your shopping, and never look at the account again, right? Throw it out. I don't care, whatever. But the next day, we'll both see $20. So, it's a free $20. You'd be really helping me out. She's lean times as I try and get this project up and off the ground and to a point where I can make a living at it. So that's that. Anyway, if you are in active addiction on whatever your drug of choice is, make today the day. Make today the day that you reach out to a friend, a family member, an NA meeting, a detox, whatever you got to do. Find somebody to talk to, and maybe today's the day that you start that lifelong journey of healing. It really is better on this side, guys. It really is. If you are the loved one of an addict, you just had time to listen to this podcast, take a minute and send that person a text today, please. Let them know they're loved. Use the words, "You are loved." It worked wonders for me when my mom used to do it in the throes of my addiction. Maybe it says "I miss you," maybe it says "I love you." Let them know you're there still, because addiction is lonely and terrible, and it stops us from reaching out. It stops us from doing the right thing, and maybe, just maybe, your message is the thing that brings them back.
Bad dudes, I've been trying to get a bag too. I'm just doing what I have to. I said, mama, I got bad news, bad moods every day, brand new tattoos on my face, sad dude, with a head full of rain. I just wanna make it rain, mama, I will be okay. I feel like I might break right now. I feel like making a fucking mistake right now. Ew. I just need a cake right now. I blow out all the candles in my brains right now. Ew. I'm so tired of flexing. I got a minor confession, like I might die from depression. Like whoa.